All right. Good morning. Welcome everyone to our workshop on implementing MLOps practices on AWS. My name is Bobby Lindsey. I'm a senior machine learning specialist solutions architect at AWS. And I have with me some esteemed colleagues who will also be speakers for today's session. And I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, my name is Kirit Tadaka. I'm a machine learning solution architect. Excited to be here. Looking forward to running through this workshop with all of you today.
Hi, I'm Shelbee Eigenbrode. I'm an AI/ML specialist solutions architect from AWS and excited to be part of this workshop with you all today.
Awesome. All right, so jumping into the agenda, we're going to start with essentially a high-level overview of the machine learning lifecycle. We'll then be looking at the details on this workshop's use case, data set, and logistics. Then we'll jump into the most important part of today's workshop, which is actually doing the workshop. And so there's going to be actually 4 hands-on labs with Amazon SageMaker. And throughout the session today, we highly encourage you to ask us questions if you have any in the chat there. So do speak up there if there are any questions. So machine learning lifecycle typically has multiple phases that include business goal identification, machine learning problem framing. We've got data processing, which is essentially the data collection piece, the pre-processing of that data, and then feature engineering. We also have model development. So this includes things like model training, model tuning, evaluation. We also have model deployment and model monitoring. And keep in mind that these phases aren't necessarily sequential in nature. You can have feedback loops here, as kind of shown in this diagram. So during today's hands-on labs, you'll be doing data preparation and data cleaning, feature engineering using SageMaker Data Wrangler. Then you'll store those features in the SageMaker feature store once you're done pre-processing that data. And then once your features are ready, you'll use SageMaker to train and tune a model, and then you'll use SageMaker to deploy that model. In addition, you're going to be using what we call SageMaker Pipelines. And this is essentially a machine learning orchestration tool that will help you run all the steps from within a single pipeline. And we'll be doing all these things inside of SageMaker Studio, which will function as your IDE for today's labs. So the use case that we'll work with is essentially here. You can see kind of a snapshot of the data. What you're going to do is develop a machine learning model to predict whether a customer will enroll in a certificate of deposit at a bank or not. So the data is as shown. You can see here we've got some demographic data and other details about the customer. And so each row is actually going to represent a single customer. So to begin, let's take a look at some of the logistics. In order to run the workshop today, we'll be using what's called an event engine. And so please use this event engine to essentially log into an AWS account that we've created for you today. Don't use your personal AWS accounts. There will be 4 labs. So we'll be having checkpoints in the session to work through those, through the details of each of those labs. And then we also have a few workshop moderators as well supporting the lab. So please raise your virtual hand if you need any support or guidance from them. Oh, sorry. So as mentioned, we'll be using SageMaker Studio as kind of the IDE to bring all of this together. Essentially, it's this kind of like one pane a view of the complete machine learning workflow and all the steps that we'll be doing today and that you care about as a data scientist and machine learning engineer. Studio essentially unifies all these tools together. You can write code, you can track experiments, you can visualize your data, you can perform debugging and monitoring essentially all within this kind of single interface. So that really helps significantly boost your productivity. In addition, since all of these steps in the the machine learning workflow are tracked within this environment, you can quickly move back and forth between the steps. You can clone, you can make changes, you can replay them, and this gives you the ability to essentially make these quick changes, observe the outcomes, collaborate effectively, and iterate faster. And so this essentially reduces your time to market for your more high quality machine learning solutions there. But before we jump into the labs, you'll need to do a few things to get started here. So the first link that you see is actually the link to our event engine. And this will provide you with your own AWS environment to work in. So go ahead and type that link in your web browser there. The event hash number that you see below will be used to actually log into the AWS console. So you'll need that as well. So go ahead and click on that first link, then enter in this event hash when prompted, and you should be set. The very last link you see here is this bit.ly link. This is essentially detailed instructions for not only workshop access, but also it walks through in detail each step of the labs that we'll be doing today. So go ahead and also navigate to that bit.ly link as well. And I'll go back to this slide, but I do want to show you a couple quick screenshots of what you'll see. So when you open up that event engine link, you're going to see an image to the left, and this is where you're going to input your event hash number there. And then once you do that, you'll be able to log into the console, so you can actually navigate to SageMaker within the console, and that's kind of the image you see to the right-hand side here is a screenshot of that. But I'll go ahead and go to the previous slide here, so you can have all that info and just make sure to let us know if you have any trouble setting that up. But we'll give everyone maybe 10 or 15 minutes or so just to get logged in and get to the right place before we continue on with the introduction to the first lab. Got it. I see a question around sign-in. There's a few options. You can use the one-time password option. I think that's the easiest. The workshop instructions at that bit.ly link will actually kind of describe every step that you should do to go through this process. So go ahead and probably start with that bit.ly link URL first, and that should walk you through each of these steps. I'll see if I can get that open on my side too. Give me a second. bit.ly link in the chat. Yeah. Let me go ahead and open up this this workshop link. Okay. So hopefully everyone can see this link. So you'll see under prerequisites, under AWS instructor-led lab, you'll see screenshots of kind of this whole process for getting logged into the AWS event engine here. So go ahead and follow through that, and you should be good to go. But yeah, do let us know if there are any questions around that. Rogelio, I think I just saw your question there. We'll leave the instructions for the lab for the workshop itself. We'll leave that available. So if you do want to come back to it and run it in your own AWS account, for example, we'll let you do that as well. This hash won't work, so you won't be provided an engine or a kind of AWS account that we have here today. But we'll leave the instructions there for you after this workshop. Okay. Hopefully most of you have logged in. If not, do let us know, but it seems like most of you have. So to introduce the first part of the lab, we'll be taking a look at Data Wrangler. And so with Data Wrangler, there's actually a variety of key features that it offers. One of the biggest components is that it provides a visual interface to import data from multiple sources, query that data, and use built-in or custom transformations. And then you can actually export that flow to production data at scale. So if we actually dig into the import process here, you can quickly inspect and import data from multiple sources with our data selection tool. So this includes data sources such as Athena, Redshift, Lake Formation, S3, and SageMaker's feature store. You can even write queries against these data sources from various file formats. So your popular CSV files, Parquet files, and even database tables. So this query data is then actually imported into a secure central data preparation environment. And this is where you'll have access to a variety of pre-built tools to prepare your data. So you can then leverage these built-in tools for data transformations, or you can actually build your own custom transformations in PySpark, SQL, or Pandas. You can then analyze features and quickly deploy data preparation jobs into your own production environment. And you can do all this while just using a visual interface that we have with Data Wrangler without having to write code unless you want to. You can then actually visualize the results of these transformations, which can help you intuitively understand your data. So Data Wrangler offers pre-configured visualization templates. These include charts like histograms, scatter plots, box and whisker plots, bar charts. And if you need any different visualizations, you can also just create and edit your own. So you can do things like quickly detect outliers or extreme values. And then once you're done with that, you can actually use something in Data Wrangler called model accuracy. Or essentially, you can create various kind of analyses. So an example of this is being able to quickly identify inconsistencies in your data preparation workflow. You can diagnose issues before your models are deployed to production. You can select a subset of your data. You can validate your model against that data, identify possible errors, determine which features are contributing more to model performance relative to other features. You can determine if additional feature engineering is needed to improve your model performance. And you can do all this without having to deploy models into production. So this actually ends up being a huge time saver for iteratively, refining the features and improving model accuracy. Finally, you can easily take code into production by just exporting your data preparation workflow here in Data Wrangler. You can export that to a notebook or essentially just this code script, right? And you can do that with a single click of a button. You can also integrate your data preparation workflow with SageMaker Pipelines or other open source orchestration frameworks such as Kubeflow or Airflow to automate model deployment and management, or publish features that you created to SageMaker's feature store for future reuse and syndication across your organization. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the first lab where we can get some hands-on experience with it. So just click on Lab 1, Amazon SageMaker Data Wrangler, and the workshop link there on the left-hand side, and you can get started with that lab. And if there are any questions, do let us know in the chat so we can help you out. And just to kind of quickly show you what I'm talking about for starting with Lab 1, let me go ahead and share my web browser here. Okay, yeah, so if you're in our workshop studio link here, you can see on the left-hand side, there's Labs 1 and Lab 2. Just go ahead and click on Lab 1, and you'll see instructions for getting started with this lab. So yeah, go ahead and navigate there, and you can get started. I'm going to leave that up. Leave that up for a minute or so. All right, I think I might show how to get into the console here. We've had a few questions about that. So let me stop sharing this PowerPoint and share the web browser. Okay, so when you sign in, you should see kind of a console view like this. Then, of course, going to SageMaker, you can just search for it. So I'll do that here. And you'll see on the left-hand side, there's a few options here. One of those is Studio, and you should already have a domain available. So if I click on Studio here, and then on the right-hand side, click Launch SageMaker Studio, there should already be a user for you here. And so in this drop-down under Launch App, you'll see a couple options, and we're going to select Studio. So what I generally do is actually open this in a new tab. So I'm on a Mac, so I just click Command and click the Studio tab here. So that'll open up into its kind of own tab and log you into our Studio environment, which means anytime I want to go back to the console, I can just go back to this tab. And if I need to go to S3, for example, I can do a search for S3 and go into S3 here, and then just switch back to this Studio tab. So if you only have the Studio tab open, I think one of the suggestions was to navigate to open a new tab and navigate to this link, and let me pull up chat so I can see that here. Or maybe one of my colleagues will Slack it to me here. But I think it's like AWS console home. Here it is. Yep. So if you go to this URL here, you can get straight to back to the console. So if you're already in Studio and this is the only tab you have open, you can just open up a new tab, go to console.aws.amazon.com. So this link here, and I think we've pasted that into the chat a few times, then that'll get you back to the AWS console. So that's kind of another way you can easily get back there. But I just wanted to show that. So let me stop sharing so I can kind of take a look at chat. All right. Hopefully most of you have finished the first lab. If not, you still have a few minutes, and you can always catch up while we work on lab 2. But it is a prereq, right, to lab 2, so make sure you do actually finish lab 1 with Data Wrangler. But with that, let's at least provide an introduction to lab 2. So lab 2 is actually going to be around SageMaker feature store. We're going to be ingesting those features that we pre-processed in Data Wrangler into a feature store. So features, if you think about it, are really the foundation of high-quality models. They represent relevant attributes or properties that your model uses for training and to make predictions. So, for example, if we look at a bank's contextual help model, which tries to do targeted marketing on its customer base to provide the most relevant possible service or banking product, these types of features would include data around customers' previous interactions, elements of their personal situation. So selecting which features your model will use for predictions is a high judgment call, requiring usually data scientists to apply domain knowledge to extract features from raw data. So these features are then used to train a model, and they're also used in inference as well when the model is making a prediction. So using SageMaker Feature Store, you can actually securely store, discover, and share features, so you don't need to recreate the same features for different machine learning applications. So this ends up saving months of development effort.
Bobby?
Oh, yeah.
There was I think your voice is a little bit like crackling. There's a little bit of a static.
I think I'm experiencing that on your side too. Can everyone hear me? I'll make sure that
Still a little bit static.
I'm using my Okay, my laptop's audio, is that okay? Is it still very static?
It's pretty staticky. I know Tony mentioned it might be the AirPods that it happens to him, so I don't know if there's a way to. Sorry to interrupt. You're on a flow there.
Can everyone hear me? Better, worse?
About the same.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Is it still bad?
Much better, thank you.
Yeah, totally weird. Didn't get any kind of internet problems, so yeah, who knows what went on. Appreciate everyone's patience there. Let me try to reshare my screen.
Perfect. And there was a request to start from the previous slide. Sorry, so that was the practice run.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll give it another go. No worries at all. All right, I guess yeah, so what we're going to be looking at is doing the second lab with SageMaker Feature Store. So essentially, features are extremely important. They're the foundation for building high quality models. They represent, relative attributes or properties that your model uses for training and to make predictions. So for example, if we look at a bank's contextual help model, which tries to do targeted marketing on a customer base, to provide the most relevant possible service or banking product, some features might include the customer's previous interactions or elements of their kind of personal situation. Selecting which features your model will use for predictions is usually a high judgment call, requiring data scientists to apply some domain knowledge to extract features from raw data. But then these features are used to actually train a model. They're used in inference when the model is making a prediction. So using SageMaker Feature Store, you can securely store these features. You can discover new features. You can share features, so you don't need to actually recreate the same features for different machine learning applications. So what this means is that over time, this saves you, potentially months of development effort. So to illustrate what I mean, consider a workflow like this that most of you are probably already familiar with. You start by getting some data from multiple sources. This could be images or text data in S3. This could be tabular data from a database, telemetry data from devices. And all this data is aggregated and transformed by some sort of processing pipeline, which is then used to train and deploy a model. But the problem is that this type of workflow happens every time you want to train a model or use process data for real-time inference, which means the same processing is repeated over and over. And it also means you have multiple processing pipelines that probably process the same feature in the same way. So if we take an alternative approach here and instead use a feature store like SageMaker Feature Store, you don't need to rerun feature pipelines anytime you need to use features for, whether it be for data analysis or training a model. Since those features are already sitting in the feature store, you can just directly pull them from there. So this means you can also reuse features across different models. And because SageMaker Feature Store has an online component as well, you can pull features with single-digit millisecond latency for inference at runtime. Furthermore, SageMaker Feature Store keeps your features in both the offline and online stores in sync with each other, so you don't risk having inconsistent features or inaccurate predictions. SageMaker Feature Store also acts as a kind of shared repository of features. So all the members of your team can share these features. You can promote reuse and therefore kind of eliminate a lot of this rework. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into Lab 2 to illustrate how we're going to essentially take all the work we did from transforming these features in Data Wrangler and how we can get them into the feature store. So let's go ahead and open up Lab 2. And so there should be a Lab 2 link you can click on in the workshop webpage. Go ahead and click on that, and it should walk you through each step of this lab. And yeah, let us know if there are any questions or concerns or anything like that, and we'll be happy to tackle that. Just a pro tip here: if you want, go ahead and just run all cells. So there's an option in the menu to actually click run all cells, and this will run every cell in the notebook. Yeah, you probably want to do that right now if you haven't already, just so that the processing job has time to spin up and do its thing. And then in the meantime, you can actually kind of go and read through all the cells and the code. So if you're already feeling a little behind, that's kind of a good way to get a little bit caught up, and we'll be prepared to move on to the next lab where we'll actually build a model. Okay, I think we'll start wrapping up lab 2 here. Hopefully everyone was able to get through most of it. If not, do let us know in the chat, and we'll continue to try to kind of help you work through some of those issues. But with that, I think we might move on to lab 3 around training a model. So we'll take these features and start building a model from it. Yeah, with that being said, I think I'll pass it along to you, Shelbee, if you're ready.
Perfect. Let me go ahead and, I don't know, do you just want to share, Bobby, or do you want me to share? Oh, I will share. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And Jordan, just for you, there is actually, I opened the tab for you, so you should see it open automatically. It should just be kind of in your open tabs on the right-hand side. I did the export. I had to do some conversion, so don't try to re-export it again. You should just see that notebook open for you automatically right now. I ran into some issues there, so I basically had to do a couple things. So if you re-export again, it's going to be the same issue. Just use the one that I actually put out there if you can. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. So next, so what you did before is a lot of kind of the data preparation, right? So you use Data Wrangler for doing some data transformations, exported those features into Feature Store. So in this next part inside the lab, what you're going to do is actually train and deploy your model. Like I said, I put a tip inside the chat that most of the time, if you run into issues in the lab, it's going to be because one of those data transformations was missed in the previous step. So just make sure you're really careful on those instructions. If you run into training issues, very likely it's one of the steps prior. So like examples, there's 6 columns that need to be dropped. So there's multiple data transformations inside there. But in the next lab, what you're going to do is first start out with some data preparation. And really with that, all you're going to do is essentially take the data from the feature store, split it off into training, test, and validation data sets. And then you're going to use SageMaker training jobs to actually train your model using that data that you prepared. So a couple of things just to kind of be aware of in terms of training. So for SageMaker training, you can use it in multiple ways. So you can bring your own algorithms. You can use SageMaker built-in algorithms, or you can use SageMaker built-in frameworks. So things like, TensorFlow, PyTorch. You really kind of have that flexibility to kind of choose how you want to use those training jobs. And then what SageMaker training does is it gives you access to a compute environment using the compute that you specify. So there's a lot of different compute options available from, GPU to CPU, as well as different sizes within those categories. And then when you're ready to actually train your model, essentially what you end up doing is you're going to specify the location of your training data in S3. Most common is S3. And then you're going to indicate the type and quantity of training instances that you want to use. And then that training environment is going to be automatically spun up for you. And then once your training is actually complete, that environment's automatically going to be torn down for you. So it is a transient training cluster that spins up for the time it takes to train, spins back down, with the exception of like early stopping and that sort of thing. There's also some other features within SageMaker training, such as automatic checkpointing, the ability to use spot instances, which is essentially our excess capacity on AWS that's offered at a discount. And then as well as the ability to track your experiments as you iterate through. And you'll do that inside the lab as well. So experiment tracking becomes key as you're iterating through all those different experiments in finding that model that's actually performing according to whatever your objective metric is. And we don't go into a ton of depth on SageMaker training. It's worthy of sessions in and of itself, but definitely check out, there's a lot of deep dive videos out there, a lot of good material on SageMaker training jobs as well to just dive a little bit deeper. And then second, deploying with SageMaker. So in the next lab, you're going to train, and then you're going to take that model artifact, and then you're going to deploy that out to a persistent real-time endpoint. So SageMaker offers a lot of different deployment options. Oh, sorry for that. Call came in. But SageMaker offers a lot of different deployment options. So you can use persistent endpoints for real-time use cases. You can use batch transform for batch use cases. You can use async inference for near real-time and larger models, as well as serverless inference for more intermediate or spiky workloads. So, and then in addition to those four main types of deployment options, there's different capabilities within each of those. So there's things like the ability to host multiple models behind a single endpoint. So this allows you, some cost savings for hosting multiple models behind one. And all of these different options are available without needing to manage infrastructure, right? So you don't have to manage that underlying infrastructure that is actually hosting your models for prediction. And then choosing the right deployment option, along with the capabilities to use within those, really just kind of allows you to, one, choose the best option for your use case, right? There's no need to use a real-time endpoint if you are really addressing a batch use case, but it also allows you to perform or choose the most cost-effective and performant option for your use case, all without having to kind of manage that underlying infrastructure. And then also within MLOps, we're often looking for ways to implement new versions of models and minimizing some of that deployment risk. So there's also deployment strategies built into SageMaker deployment options so that when you're implementing or deploying a new model into production, you can do so while minimizing risk. So using things like A/B strategies, blue-green with canary or linear traffic shifting, as well as automating rollbacks. All of those things help minimize some of that deployment risk when you actually introduce a new model version into production. And then finally, when used in combination with SageMaker projects, which Kirit is going to go over in the next lab, you're able to also implement continuous deployment, continuous delivery strategies for introducing your new models into production. So that being said, again, we don't have a lot of time to go into SageMaker deployments. Again, it's worthy of a whole session or sessions in and of itself, but there's a lot of good videos out there to check out, a lot of good content. So definitely recommend diving a little bit deeper there. But for now, let's go over what we're going to cover inside this particular lab. So the next lab that you're going to work on. And don't worry if you're still kind of getting caught up from the previous labs, it's not a problem at all. I'm going to go ahead and share the instructions for the next lab. Sorry, trying to find the one here. All right. So let me know if you're able to see. Oh, are you able to see my instructions? Okay, I can't see the checks. If I go back, it'll. Yeah, it looks like you are, right? Let's go with that. If you're not, let me know. But in this next section, you're going to essentially train and deploy. So there's two different notebooks that you're going to go through inside there. And those notebooks were cloned as part of that first step when you cloned it down in some of your setup activities. But the first one, you're going to go through a data preparation notebook, which essentially all this is doing is taking that data from the feature store, splitting it out into train, test, and validation data sets. And then you're going to go into another notebook, which is your train and deploy notebook. And within that, you're going to essentially train. And in this particular case, I know I mentioned you can train, with bringing your own algorithms, built-in frameworks, or built-in algorithms with SageMaker. In this case, we're going to use a built-in algorithm. So we're just going to use XGBoost. So you're going to, set up your estimator. You're going to set up a SageMaker training job. So that training job will run, again, on transient compute, spin back down for you. And then once that training job is complete, you'll then deploy it to a persistent real-time endpoint. And then once it actually is deployed, there are going to be some steps inside here to then evaluate it. So you're going to evaluate your model, send a prediction request in, get a response back out. And then that pretty much wraps up lab 3. Just a couple things to note. I mentioned it before, but if you do run into issues, it is very likely that something went wrong in your data transformations or you maybe missed a particular data point. So just kind of, if you run into issues, feel free to call it out inside the chat. But also just know that you may have to kind of go back a few steps, redo some steps before that if there were some issues in some of those data transformations. And I think that is it. Yep, that is it before we get started. So go ahead, if you have not already, go ahead and start lab 3 after you finish lab 2, and then we will be hanging out in the chat for any questions that come up. While we're here, I'm going to go ahead, Jordan, if you're still on, I'm going to share what I see in mine just to kind of show you what I'm looking at and to hopefully help you get to the same point. So inside here, I'm inside, this is your account actually. So one thing to just kind of know is if you go to the folder over here, oh, so I saw a new one that just got created. Yeah, you definitely, let me delete that one because it is causing some issues. For some reason, there's something going on inside this account, but if you can, just to get to the same spot, go over to the folder over here.
Hey, Shelbee, we can't see your screen.
What's that?
We can't see what you're sharing.
Oh, shoot. Can you see now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Carrot. So I just want to kind of get you to the same spot. So if you go over to here, this is going to deviate a little from the instructions, which is why I wanted to kind of show it real quick. So for everyone else, like, you don't have to pay attention to this part. But if you go over to the notebook over here, or this little file, so click on MLOps Amazon SageMaker. Hopefully you're in the same spot. And then click on this one, Amazon SageMaker End-to-End MLOps. And then inside here, you should see one that says Workshop IPY-MB. Click on that one. For some reason, inside your workshop flow, whenever I export it, it's exporting as plain text. So if you do that, it's just going to happen again for some reason. So what I did in the meantime is essentially downloaded, re-uploaded. So you should see your workshop here. And if you click on it, you'll notice, like I'll click on it again just so you can kind of see it. If you click on it, then you'll see it in your notebook. So hopefully that fixes it and you're able to see this. But let me know if you're not. And we can kind of go from there.
All right. Hello, everyone. So finally, almost at the end. And I know we have only 15 minutes, but I wanted to give you all an overview of MLOps, how traditional CI/CD DevOps practices can fit into this ML workflow that we've been building, and how you can do that all on SageMaker. So to give you a bit of an overview, so far what we've done is some data preparation. So we've used Data Wrangler to work through a set of steps to prepare our data. We've ingested that into Feature Store. We're now training our models and deploying these models as well. So it's fine doing this through notebooks when you need to do it one-off and you're just maybe experimenting. But when it comes to having these workflows part of a larger work stream, or you're building an ML app and you need to continuously be delivering the best performing model, or continuously retrain your model every time you get new data, a workflow based on your notebooks and clicking through them will start to break down. Not only do you need to automate that entire end-to-end process from data preparation to model deployment, but at each step of the way, you need the ability to keep track of what's been happening and to store intermediate steps so that you can reuse them from a later stage. So we saw a little bit of that with Feature Store, where you could store those set of features, and now you can reuse those features at a later point in time, or you can have other people reuse those features or reuse them when you're training different models. So similarly, experimentation is another core aspect where you need to keep track of the parameters, the metrics, the type of algorithms that you've trained, managing your models. So cataloging your models in a model registry is another key aspect. So every time you train a new version of your model, you need to have a place where you can keep track of all those new versions, what you've used to create those new versions, how those new versions are performing, and then keep track of which versions of your model are making it through to deployment. So with SageMaker, there are a few tools that we offer to support this. Number one is SageMaker Pipelines. So if you look in Lab 4, what you'll be doing is writing a SageMaker pipeline to do all of the steps that you've done so far in Labs 1, 2, and 3. So you'll write a SageMaker pipeline to do a data processing step, to train your model, and to register it into a model registry. We have SageMaker Model Registry, which is our model management feature. That's where you can catalog different versions of your models and have a central place to view all of the models that you've trained, organized by use case or organized by model type. You can add metrics to those models. You can add your custom metadata to those models. And it gives you a central place where you can see what's happening with the models that you've created, how models are being trained, how many models you have, and which models are being deployed. We have SageMaker Experiments, which you should also see in Lab 3. When you train your model, you'll be using SageMaker Experiments as well. So that gives you the flexibility to keep track of what kind of code you're using, what kind of metrics and hyperparameters you're using, find the best set of hyperparameters so you can compare different versions of training your model with different hyperparameters to find the best fit. And we have SageMaker Projects, which is what gives you one-click deployment of CI/CD templates that you can fit into any ML workflow. So for example, what we'll be doing in Lab 4 is authoring a SageMaker pipeline to automate the training of your model. So running that SageMaker pipeline will automate everything from data prep to model registration. And then we'll be using a SageMaker project, which will generate a Git repository with CloudFormation code within it to deploy your model to an endpoint. And when you create that project, it's defining triggers on the back end that will respond to whenever you've approved a model in the model registry. So you can now have automatic model deployment through this manual action of approving a model in the registry. So this simulates workflows which you'd oftentimes see in enterprise use cases where your models need to go through some stringent approval mechanisms before they can be deployed and used in production or used in your applications. So those are the things that are enabled in the model registry. And you can extend SageMaker projects beyond the templates that we have today to templates of your own that can bring in whatever complexity you need into your workflow and give you the flexibility that you're looking for in your MLOps architecture. So I know some of you are likely going to still be running Lab 3, but we have these accounts open for, I think, till tomorrow. So I'd recommend once you're done with Lab 3, read through Lab 4, author the SageMaker pipeline, use the project to have automatic deployment, play around with it a little bit, and maybe even try creating templates of your own. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to have you all run through this lab, but I think Shelbee shared our email addresses. So if you have any questions, concerns, need any help, feel free to reach out. And hopefully some of you have made it through Lab 3 and can get started on Lab 4. If not, no worries. Take your time. As long as you get through it, I think it'll be a good experience.
All right. I know we have 2 minutes. So we'll go ahead and do a brief wrap up. We'll try to make sure all the questions that are existing in the channel today are closed out before we kind of drop off from the chat here. But just a couple things, just kind of a summary of what we did inside this workshop. In the first couple labs, you use Data Wrangler Feature Store largely for all those data transformations, your data preparation stage in your ML workflow. Then you train, tune, deploy your model on SageMaker. Then you use SageMaker projects and pipelines to help create the entire ML workflow, right? To actually be able to use a continuous delivery pipeline to then deploy your model to a persistent endpoint. And through all this, we use SageMaker Studio, which is essentially the integrated IDE for performing all of these tasks as a data scientist. So that being said, a couple of different things to point out here. There is a lot of different learning online available, a lot of free digital courses that you can take as well, focusing on SageMaker, focusing on analytics services, but also focusing on machine learning in general. So there's a pretty broad variety, couple links here that you may want to check out. And then, of course, obviously you can test those skills with some of the AWS certifications once you feel comfortable. And then finally, just a huge thank you. I know this is a long lab. Probably ideally it happens in a 3-hour time frame. So for those that were able to get through it, you were super speedy. That's awesome. But for those that were not, just know those accounts are still going to be open till roughly 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So feel free to continue working on this workshop as well as play with SageMaker in general. Those accounts will be live and available to you. Here is our contact information once again. I put it in the channel too, so that you can copy and paste it from there. There is also a MLOps site that I encourage you to check out. We're kind of continuously adding content to this site right now. So this is specific to SageMaker. So if you want to kind of bookmark that, there's a lot of resources up there. We're continuing to add more resources. So if you want to watch that over the next couple of months. And in terms of the slide, let me follow up with the conference folks to see if they are sharing the slides. I believe they are in PDF format, so I will double check on that. And then the recording will be posted shortly after, because I believe there's going to be some editing of some of the downtime while we were doing some of the actual lab work. That being said, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate everyone's time and kind of diving in on this. I don't know, Bobby, if you have any final words you wanted to share.
I just wanted to reiterate that and say thank you all for your patience as well as working with us through the workshop. It was a lot of fun for us to be here and work with you all. So appreciate it again.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Curate had to drop, but he would thank you as well. So appreciate it all. We'll make sure the questions are kind of rounded out before we drop, but then we will potentially see you all over the next few days, right?
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.